You have to brainwash children. Children need to be brainwashed. They need it. Because if you don't brainwash them, somebody else will. Either television will, or their friends will, or they'll just work it out on their own, which is the worst case. If you don't brainwash kids, and I'm using that term very thoughtfully, children are not influenced, they're brainwashed. And you gotta do it right, or you don't get a good kid, right? So how could Black America brainwash its own kids easily, and fix an entire generation the moment they're born? Then there's the cities, because it's hard to fix anything, including the schools, if you're living in a place that's, so depressed economically. Here's an idea that won't fix people who have already been born and have already reached a certain age. I'm talking about something that would stop it cold from this point on, so that the next baby born would be born into a better world. And here it goes. You convince somehow, because this would require persuasion as well, so the Black community would have to embrace this wildly for it to work. You embrace this, that education is the key to success. Now, education including any kind of profession. So I'm talking about a skill stack, I'm talking about the kinds of things you would learn in this book, etc. And so this is all education, but I'll say a practical education. So imagine, if you will, that Black America says, hey, let's end racism. And everybody will say, that's not possible, that's too hard. Oh yeah? Watch this. Watch this. We're going to get every mother, you don't even need the fathers for this. And I'll tell you why you don't need the fathers in a minute. But you don't need the fathers to be part of this. Just the moms. Keep it simple. The fathers can help, but they're not required. And the mother, from the first time the baby can hear, says, you're going to college. Or, education is the thing. Education is the thing. Education is the thing. And you just brainwash those kids into thinking education is the thing. Now, I've gone further and said you can make a checklist and say, if you check any of these boxes, you're not going to succeed. One of them, did you have trouble with the law? Did you get involved with drugs or a gang? So it's sort of an easy checklist. And you just give that checklist to every new mom in an urban area. And again, this works for everybody. The fact that I'm talking about the Black experience doesn't mean it's limited. This would work for everybody. And you just say, here's the checklist, kid. Oh, you're only 2 years old, you don't quite understand this? Well, look how important it is. I know you don't understand it. And you're 3 years old, still don't understand it, but you realize there's a checklist. These are the things you need to do. Stay off drugs. Education is the key. Then the kid's about 5. At around 5, they don't understand how the world works, but the brainwashing becomes permanent. Education is your way to success. Education is your way to success. Education. And again, practical education. I'm not talking about, an English degree. I mean, it could be mechanics or programming or any practical thing. And what would happen 18 years from then? Or let's say 21 years from then. 21 years from then, let's say that every Black mother just started drilling that into their kids. Doesn't mean they all do it, but they're drilling it in. And you start developing a generation which 21 years from now, you're an employer. All right, you wait for this. Here's the good part. It's 21 years in the future, and you're an employer. A Black applicant comes in, fresh out of college. What do you say to yourself? Because you're a racist. Because everybody's biased, right? It's just not something you can turn off. So what do you say to yourself 21 years after that all started, hypothetically? You say to yourself, oh, good. I got a super baby. I got a super baby. You're hired. Because all you want to hear, if you're an employer, is that you got a kid who came up through a system from the moment they were born, educate, 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 it's your way out. You tell me that kid doesn't get the job? No, that kid gets the job. And what happens when that kid, well educated, does well? Well, people start noticing it. You could, in one generation, turn racism upside down. And you could say to yourself, black kid comes in for an interview, he's 21, and he was born, from the moment he was born, he was drilled with education. White kid comes in, looks like sort of a similar background, but you don't know what kind of programming that kid had. I don't know. I think you take the one that got brainwashed the most productive way, education. Now, why do I mention this? Because this is what my mother did to me. My mother was not educated, nor was my father. Both my mother and my father had to repeat a grade in school. Now, my mother, because she had some family problems, my father, because he just had a low IQ. So he just failed a grade in the way that people do. So neither of my parents had any college, but from the moment I could understand language, my mother said to me, you're going to college, it's the key to your success. You can do anything you want. You're going to college, it's the key to your success. You're going to college. Now, she didn't have any money and didn't even know anybody who'd been to college. But that simple little mantra, if I could call it that, programmed me. It programmed me. There was not one moment of my life that I didn't think I was going to college, and we couldn't even afford it. We couldn't even come close to affording it, especially with 3 kids. We figured it out. I got some scholarships, and my brother and sister went to less expensive colleges, etc. We figured it out. But we never doubted that that was the path. Now, that's my suggestion. It's something that 100% of people could do. There's no mother who couldn't program their kid. You just have to say it over and over and over again. That's all it is. Kids can be programmed just by repetition. Consistency and repetition. That's all it is. In one generation, you could turn a black applicant into a super baby. In other words, the employer says, yeah, I want somebody who came up with that kind of programming. There are lots of things that need to be fixed, whether you're black or anybody else. And here's my current thinking on this. We're going to the whiteboard. How would you know that? He says. No, I'm speculating. So I tell you when I think I know something, and I tell you when I'm speculating. So that was speculation, which you're free to disagree with and or fact check. All right, here's how I see the world. So the Democrats support teachers' unions. Teachers' unions are the reason that you don't have school choice. That's the reason you have bad teachers. Teachers' unions are the entire problem, because if you get a bad school, you get a bad life. Where are the bad teachers? They're in the inner cities, disproportionately teaching black students. So basically the teachers' unions are the source of most racism. Right? Institutional racism is primarily, the thing that I would agree that black people say is that there's definitely a ripple all the way from slavery. There's definitely something about the system that tries to maintain itself, which makes it harder for people to have the mobility that they need. There was way more mobility, I think, when I was a kid. When I was young, there was way more mobility for everybody. So I think there's much to be said about systemic racism. Everybody's got their own definition of it. But this is a good example, in my opinion. This would be systemic racism with the primary system, the teachers' unions. And you can't fix that as long as Democrats have control, because the teachers' unions favor the Democrats, therefore the Democrats give the teachers' unions what they want. The Republicans would like to break this model by saying, how about instead of a bad school, how about you have a choice, add a little competition in there. right? Put, maybe some charter schools if you can get them, but at least competition. And so that's the Republican way to fix it. Now, which of those two groups, Democrats or Republicans, are trying to fix systemic racism in the place that it matters the most? In other words, if you get this right, and by the way, the black Americans watching this, jump in, and I guess on my eye that's bothering me, jump in and agree with this. If you get a solid education, and let's say a useful thing, you still have racism to deal with, but you're going to slice right through it. It doesn't make it go away, but you can make it less important. And everybody's got their thing, right? I'm short, I'm old, you're ugly, you've got a weight problem, whatever it is. Everybody's got something. But if you got a strong training and background in education, you can probably slice through your problem too. Just different problems. All right, then there's the cities, because it's hard to fix anything, including the schools, if you're living in a place that's so depressed economically. And of course, the mayors tend to be Democratic in the big urban areas, and nothing can get fixed in an urban area if there's money involved, because the people who want to sell their services to the city can just bribe people easily. Now, this has nothing to do with race. There's no race in this conversation. As long as you have this model for cities, where the people running the city can take bribes by big contractors, etc., to do things, how can anything ever get fixed? It doesn't even. There's no system here that can fix that. The system as it exists is 1, super racist, 2, unfixable. It's completely unfixable, because you're going to be living in the middle of just garbage if you don't have any way for the mayor to do a real job when they're being bribed to do whatever the contractors want. All right. The only way I could think of to fix the problem of cities being poorly managed is by the what I've called government in a box. Now, I think somebody needs to create the government in a box option so that voters can at least have an option. Imagine if you would, I don't know, now in California you can put anything on a ballot, called a proposition, if you get enough signatures. I don't know how widespread that is, so somebody fact check me on this. But suppose that you had an urban area that was just a mess. Let's take Baltimore. So Baltimore is just a mess, right? And we know that the governance is probably part of the problem historically. Suppose somebody started a petition and said, look, if we get enough signatures here and enough votes, we will replace the mayor and the administration for, let's say, 1 year, could be 3 years, whatever it is, but limited time, with this government in a box, which might be, who knows, maybe it's people from Switzerland who just want to come in and they don't care about your country, they're just trying to do their job, so they get recommended to be government in a box at another city. So they want to do a good job just because it's a business, right? A government doesn't need to do a good job if it can also get elected. If your mayor knows he or she is going to get reelected, they don't really have to do a good job. But if you had a government in a box, which was a private company, let's say consultants, who would come in for a year or 3, just straighten things out, get things on the right track, and then at the end of that you say, all right, it's time for these guys to move on, fix another city. But until that exists, until you have a government in the box option, until somebody offers it, you're just stuck with the old system, which is racist in a systemic way. Now, let me offer you my most provocative thought for ending racism. Now, would it end racism? It would come close. So let's say ending racism is too big, because humans are just, we're unfixable when it comes to recognizing patterns, especially fake patterns. So you can't get rid of people's bias, but you can certainly find systems that overcome them so so well that they don't matter as much.